Hi, I'm Jean Schumacher, founder of Simply Plant-Based, where I have programs to help you to change your health destiny, including the PlantBased Academy, where I provide help, support, guidance, and resources to switch to a plant-based lifestyle, as well as the Pregnancy Advantage, where Dr. Deborah Shapiro, OBGYN, she and I help women to get their bodies pregnant ready or help heal your bodies if dealing with infertility issues. Today, I have the honor of connecting with Dr. Leigh Ettinger, who's a board-certified pediatric nephrologist and obesity medicine, and is a specialist in hypertension. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me here today.
Thanks a lot for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Oh, it's a good one. This conversation that we're about to have is based upon the article in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine, of which you are one of the authors, and it's titled Plant-Based Diets and Hypertension. Let's talk about hypertension. Oh my gosh, global epidemic. Risk factors for many adverse outcomes. I mean, like, what issues are we talking about? What does this look like?
Right. So the high blood pressure, the systolic, you can think of with each heartbeat, is a pressure wave crashing into your more delicate organs. And over the years, over the decades, that affects the target organs. And the target organs are the 5 organs within our body that are very specialized. So you don't hear about high blood pressure causing liver failure, because the liver is a very kind of homogeneous organ that you can lose a part of it here or there and still have good liver function. But the organs that are targets of high blood pressure that are more specialized are things like the brain. So, your brain has got very specific areas for very specific functions. So as that pressure wave keeps crashing harder and harder into delicate areas of the brain, you can have strokes and TIAs and things like that. So the brain is a very sensitive organ to the high blood pressure. The other target organs are the back of the eyes. So you can start to have retinal damage from high blood pressure, and a doctor looking into the back of your eye can start to see damage from high blood pressure if that's occurring. Your kidneys are very delicate organs also, and at rest, they get 20% of the blood flow from the heart. So they are the, at rest, most perfused organ in the body. Certainly when you're exercising, your muscles will start to get more blood flow than that. But because of this workload that the kidney must do, the kidney also gets damaged by the high blood pressure. And then the other target organs are the heart. So the tiny blood vessels that feed the little areas of the heart, if you lose your left anterior descending artery because of damage from high blood pressure, then you end up having a heart attack. That's the quote unquote widowmaker. So very delicate and sensitive areas of the heart, specialized areas of the heart, can be damaged by high blood pressure. And then the fifth, and sometimes forgotten by the medical students, organ, that when I'm trying to teach them about high blood pressure, is the blood vessels themselves. So the blood vessels themselves throughout the body must change in response to the damage being done by the high blood pressure. And they respond, if you can think about a wall, if something's crashing into the wall over and over and over, what is the wall going to do to prevent itself from cracking or collapsing if the wall could make a change? And the wall thickens to be stronger under the barrage of the blood pressure. So all the tiny blood vessels throughout your body respond to this high blood pressure wave by thickening and hardening and stiffening in order to not rupture, basically. And that damage can happen throughout the body. And there are researchers who actually biopsy the fat in people's butts and look under the microscope at the fat in your butt, and which is representative of blood vessels throughout your body. But by looking under the microscope at that fat, they can see changes in the blood vessels themselves in the fat. So this is just an example of what's going on elsewhere in the body.
Okay, good to know. I still got plenty of fat back here. They can have at it. So, but I mean, you can't ignore the data. I mean, without question. I mean, it's been established in clinical trial data, including randomized controlled trials, that plant-based diets are an effective lifestyle intervention for high blood pressure. Talk to us about this. What are some of the attributes of a plant-based diet that could lower your blood pressure?
Mhm. Right, so the plant-based diets are very high in foods with high fiber and high water content. So because you're filling up on these 0-calorie components of food, they can really help in weight management and weight loss. They're very low in fat, and certainly no trans fats and saturated fats, which have been associated with heart disease also. So through those mechanisms, just by losing weight can help lower your blood pressure. Whole food plant-based diet is actually very low in salt. It's interesting that salt, we're getting exposed to a lot more salt than our cave people ancestors did. Salt is actually very minimally absorbed by plants in the plant roots. And I'm talking about sodium chloride. You can think about it this way, that a herbivore kind of go out of their way for salt. So on the farm, an herbivore is fed a salt lick. You know, the farmers leave out salt licks for the horses and the cows. And in the wild, an herbivore will seek out salt by licking rocks or dry riverbeds. So plants themselves have so little salt that the herbivore needs to go out of their way to get some salt, because the herbivore needs some salt. Now the carnivore comes along, and the lion doesn't need a salt lick because it eats the herbivore. And by eating the muscle of the herbivore, gets the salt that the herbivore has collected. So you can think that a human being eating less or no meat and focusing on plants is going to, just by virtue of this mechanism, eat much less salt, because they're not eating the muscles of the herbivores that gather the salt. Now, humans also do something special, and that is we mine salt. So we're getting exposed to this mined salt taken out of the earth and put in our foods for taste, for flavoring, and as a preservative. Historically, the introduction of salt into the food supply allowed food to be transported over great distances. And it may have been actually one of the ways that the Roman Empire was able to expand so much, is once they were able to figure out how to properly salt and preserve food to feed their armies over long distances. So salt has actually played quite a role in our history. But once we started mining salt and adding it to food, I think that really became a problem for our blood pressure.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And I know like restaurants in particular are really, it's an easy way. It's low cost to add flavor to food. It makes you thirsty, so you're going to drink more. So
yes.
Okay, so that's one of the best ways that they can make money, is by sodas and drinks and things like that they keep bringing to your table because you're thirsty now. But the amount of sodium is absolutely frightening in how much, like, just looking at, and that's one of the things that I teach, is how to read nutrition labels, because it's a huge issue. In, like, if you look at a tomato sauce, like typical, you're talking about 25, 30, sometimes 40, 50% sodium. It's absolutely crazy how much sodium that there is in these products. And especially because, like, the serving size is so small that you're eating a lot more than that anyway, according to what the nutrition label says on the back. But just to give you an example, I'm one of the rare people that, because they say, high blood pressure is the silent killer. And my blood pressure responds to sodium so quickly. And I went out to, we're gutting our kitchen, so we were eating out more than normal. And we went to a restaurant. I got a salad. I brought my own dressing, and I got a cup of soup. It just sounded so good, black bean soup. And I made sure there was no animal fats, no animal products. I made sure, and I forgot to ask about the salt. Well, I had one of the worst blood pressure headaches ever on this planet. I didn't even make it out to my car. I thought my head was going to split open. Yeah. And I went and Googled it. It was just 8 ounces. 8 ounces of a little tiny cup of soup. And in that cup of soup, it was almost 60% of your daily nutritional requirement for sodium. Well, I wouldn't eat that because I don't cook with it. I don't salt my foods. And I'm very careful about any processed foods at all that come into this house, and to make sure that there's, like, either no sodium or no salt added. And I wouldn't eat that much salt in a week, never mind in, like, one sitting, So it took me several days for my body to react to that, or to to get rid of the salt. So
I had a similar experience. When you go plant-based and so much salt is taken out of your diet, you definitely become more sensitive. I had lunch from it's not a fast food place, but it's a burrito place, and I got back to the hospital. I was rounding on the dialysis unit, and then I stopped for lunch and went back to the hospital, and I had a clinic in the afternoon. I was just feeling so awful in the afternoon, and I didn't know why, but then I thought maybe it was my lunch. I looked at the nutritional content of the burrito online for this restaurant chain, and it was 2,500 milligrams of salt, which is like so much. And I was like, I haven't eaten there again. It's just too much. But
well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, same situation. My husband and I, we were out doing grocery shopping, and we stopped at one of those similar type of places where you can pick and choose. And the line was really long. And thank goodness, because I got online and I started looking at the nutritional, information. And I said, honey, if I eat here, we're going to have to go. The next stop will be the emergency room. But I'll just, I'm like, we can't eat here. So we ended up going to Whole Foods and then just getting foods at, in the salad bar, whatever. But yeah. Ooh.
I've heard three theories as to why we like salt and why we crave salt. And unfortunately, it seems like nowadays the food companies and food manufacturers are taking advantage of this instinct of us to seek salt. So one of the theories is that we evolved around the equator. It was hot, we were sweating, we were losing salt through our skin, and that made us thirsty for salt to replace the sweat, or to seek out salt to replace the sweat losses. So we have that instinct for salt. And then another theory is that we need trace elements, selenium, magnesium, but we those don't have flavor for us. You don't wake up and like say, oh, I'm in the mood for some cadmium this morning or something. But when our caveman ancestors would find something salty, for example, like meat, which has the salt from the muscle, or fish, or some plant that was absorbing more salt, that we were instinctually inclined to eat that salty food to get the trace elements that we need. Don't have a flavor for us. And then a third theory I heard was that salt is a preservative and can keep like products from getting moldy, getting bacterial growth, and that we have bacteria in our gut, and that we kind of need a constant supply of salt going into our gut to suppress bacterial overgrowth in our guts, so that it's almost like not an antibiotic, but it's like kind of keeps our guts from overgrowth. So with a bacteria that might be bad for us, so that the caveman ancestors, and they weren't cave people ancestors, they weren't eating as sterilized food as we were, so they kind of had to seek out and get some salt to keep themselves from getting diarrheal illnesses, which back then was a risk for death from dehydration. So that might have been another reason why we crave salt. So these are just some interesting theories, but there's nothing wrong with a person wants a salty snack. That's not a character flaw. It's not a lack of willpower. It's maybe just our evolution that we have this instinctual need for salty things for those reasons. So.
What about the effects on our microbiome of a plant-based diet?
Yeah, so we were talking about the microbiome, which is all the bacteria that's in and on our body. And yeah, there are studies that show that, and this is an evolving field, but that microbiome imbalances, if you have overgrowth of certain kinds of bacteria, that can lead to weight gain. That can lead to chronic diseases even. The plant-based diet, with its hearty amount of fiber, and most people aren't getting enough fiber, the fiber going into our guts feeds the healthy bacteria and keeps our gut microbiome in a nice balance that promotes weight maintenance, promotes good health, is anti-inflammatory. It makes you feel good too, because the good gut bacteria also secrete hormones and are a nice way to boost kind of a good feeling. They found like serotonin coming out of your gut, going to your brain, and all these other chemicals that the microbiome helps in. So we want to be a good host for our microbiome and give lots of good plants and plant fiber.
Okay, well, there was a meta-analysis of 32 of these studies about a plant-based diet. Talk to us about this.
A meta-analysis is a study of studies. So looking at these 32 studies, combining the data and making adjustments where needed to make the data as equally comparable as possible. It showed that consumption of vegetarian diets was associated with a lower mean blood pressure.
Oh, well, there was the epic Oxford study where they analyzed over 11,000 British men and women with and without hypertension. What did they find there?
Again, those that were vegan had the lowest rates of high blood pressure compared to those who were eating a more meat-centric diet. So these are very supportive observational studies. So looking at points in time in the population to see what's different. You shouldn't make a conclusion that one thing causes another because there are too many variables that are not accounted for and there's no intervention done. But as a form of study, these observational studies can help guide us and help us predict where interventions might be helpful.
It's true. Well, weight gain and obesity, they can facilitate a rise in blood pressure through several different mechanisms. Talk to us about this.
Okay, so when someone is obese, then there are several mechanisms as to how their blood pressure can rise. So for one, it's been shown that when someone's obese, they have increased tubular sodium reabsorption, which impairs their ability to put more salt into the diet, into their urine.
Wait. Translate that. Come on, translate that.
So the kidneys are kind of silly. If they were being designed, this is kind of a silly way to design them. But the kidneys are, you have 1 million filters in each kidney. Those are called the glomeruli, followed by 1 million tubes, tiny tubes. What the kidney actually does with those filters, it is to hold on to the red blood cells and to hold on to large molecules like protein. But passing through the filters is the water in your blood. That becomes the water in your urine, but also the electrolytes, things like salts, sodium, chloride, potassium, things like that. They're too tiny. So they pass into the urine. So from the filters into the tubes. And then the tubes, their job is to reabsorb like 90% of what goes through. So you can think of like a person can make usually 10 liters of urine per day. So 10 liters are passing through the tubules, and then the tubule will absorb like 90% of that, and someone will only make a few hundred milliliters of urine per day. That goes eventually down to the bladder to be urinated out. So it's it kind of looks like an inefficient mechanism. But you can imagine if someone's 150 pounds and they eat that burrito like I ate that has 2,500 milligrams, let's say 2.5 grams of sodium. So someone who's 150 pounds, imagine that 2.5 grams distributed throughout their blood volume, compared to someone who is 300 pounds. So let's say they're twice as big, and they eat that same burrito, and the salt is distributed into a much larger volume. So as the much less salt is kind of going to go to the kidneys because it's hanging out in other parts of the body, in a much larger body. So much less salt goes into the tubules. The kidney doesn't even kind of know that there's a lot of salt elsewhere in the body because the body is so large at 300 pounds and has the salt elsewhere. So you're going to lose less salt when you're weighing more, when you're obese, and more salt is going to stay in your body just because you have a bigger body, and the kidney can't recognize that. And the salt in the body is a main contributor of high blood pressure.
So are there other factors?
Yeah, so there's activation with people who have obesity of the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system.
Wait. Come on. What? Translate that. Come on. Into English, please.
So this is a system that our body has to compensate for blood losses. So to compensate for dehydration, to compensate for bleeding or diarrhea, or anytime that your blood volume is getting low, this system will kick in. The kidney senses the less blood volume and triggers this cascade of events, this cascade of hormones that will then raise the blood pressure to maintain a blood pressure that might be falling and dropping acutely even because of one of these problems. So this is a way that our body helped us survive when there wasn't IV hydration easily available, for example. So the problem happens that the kidney will trigger the system when it senses less blood flow. Fortunately, people with obesity, because they have large abdominal girth and they have greater intra-abdominal pressure, that extra fat and that extra weight on their abdomen will actually squeeze the kidneys that are kind of in the back of the abdomen. So when the kidney gets squeezed by this extra weight, then it doesn't get the blood flow that it is expecting. And it instead thinks, we're bleeding, or we're dehydrated. That's why I'm not getting the blood flow that I like. And then it triggers this renin-angiotensinaldosterone system, which has a cascade of events which will raise the blood pressure. So it's the kidney kind of misinterpreting what's going on in the body and raising the blood pressure that might be normal up to too high because of obesity and the pressure, the squeeze that it's under. And so there's a whole class of medicines that will block this system. So your angiotensin receptor blockers, the ARBs, the ACE inhibitors, there's a converting enzyme, the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors are two classes of medicines that work specifically on this cascade of events.
Wow. Oh my God. Are there any other factors?
Well, people with obesity have also been found to have increased sympathetic tone. So that is the flight or fright response that our body has. Again, when our cave people ancestors saw a tiger coming over the hill, the response was to increase the blood pressure to get blood pumping up to our brain so we could outthink the tiger, grab the spear that we made, and to our muscles so that we could outrun the tiger, climb a tree, or fight with the tiger. So that was the fight or flight mechanism. And that's triggered by the sympathetic nervous system. And unfortunately, it's been found that people with obesity have an increased tone of their sympathetic nervous system. And there are a lot of theories why this might be. For one, I think that they might have increased sympathetic tone because they're actually carrying their gym around with them. So think about a guy who, again, going back to the guy who weighs 150 pounds, if he decided to put on a weighted vest that weighed 50 pounds and started to walk around and go about his day with that 50-pound vest, all of a sudden it would be a lot harder walking up steps, getting in and out of the car, even sleeping with this weight on his chest, for example. So, and he would only weigh 200 pounds. But you'd be looking at him and say, oh, he's working so hard. Again, take that to the 300-pound person who is struggling to get in and out of the car, struggling to get up steps, walking. You know, there's this unfortunate characterization that people with obesity are lazy. But no, they're carrying their gym around with them all day long. Even while they sleep, it's hard. Their big diaphragm muscle has to push that abdominal mass down, has to lift the extra weight on their chest wall. So someone with obesity is even working hard while they're sleeping. So this constant exercising is quite a workload for their body. And I think putting them under the stress that's stimulating the sympathetic tone, stimulating them to try to rev up kind of as if to exercise, as if a tiger was coming over the hill. The other theory is that, as I described, someone with obesity is more likely to have sleep apnea and not have as restful a sleep, which puts them into a stressed state the next day. And the sympathetic activity is humming along just to try to keep someone awake who might be exhausted because they have such poor sleep. So the same hormones that our body wants to keep us alert and keep us awake, again, for the tiger coming over the hill is the same kind of hormone response, the sympathetic response that someone with obesity might have just because their body's trying to keep them awake through the day. Or maybe they're reaching for the coffee or the Red Bull that has caffeine as a stimulant to compensate for the poor sleep. And caffeine has been shown to raise blood pressure too. So there's seems to be indirect and and direct ways that our sympathetic nervous system gets involved. People with obesity, and then as a side effect, raises blood pressure.
I like how you talked about how much more like carrying your gym around, because I've lost at my point over 100 pounds. And I think of it this way, that I was carrying 10-pound bowling balls on my body at all times.
Yeah. That's so impressive what you've done. Yeah, it's just a shame that people have this characterization that a person with obesity is lazy, but no, the 150-pound person is lazy, resting all day. It's the 300-pound person who's working very hard.
Oh, it's true. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, and if you do have the internal locus to want that change, then you're going to need help and support, because you're going to have a lot of questions, because you're going to be changing your lifestyle. I mean, everything that you've learned for the last however many years you've been on the planet, you're going to be changing that. And so you're going to need help. And so I've created the Plant-Based Academy to help people and provide that support and coaching and education. And I know that you offer as well. So share with us what you offer.
Right. So I worked in my hospital in the major medical center in a pediatric weight management program. And I've since left and developed my own pediatric weight management program. Again, for people with an internal locus of control who want to learn how to eat healthier and eat more plant-based. And so I offer a 12-week program with the support of telemedicine visits, with an e-course so that you can learn at home. And I've also coordinated with a plant-based chef so that there are virtual cooking classes to your own kitchen, and also a youth fitness expert. She can meet families online and do a virtual exercise classes depending on what the child's interest is, whether that's gaining strength or conditioning or flexibility, things like that. So in that very comprehensive and supportive 12-week program, I'm helping someone, hopefully a family with an internal locus of control who really want to learn how to take these steps. And then another program that I offer is a 4-week pediatric nutrition optimization program, because what I've been frustrated by is a lot of families that I work with, both when I was in the nephrology department and in the obesity management programs, is that the pediatricians would kind of be getting counter advice. So I'd see a family and they say, oh, I developed anemia. My pediatrician said I should eat more meat, or, oh, I need dairy every day. And so what I really want to help support, or families that were vegan or vegetarian or trying different variations of pescatarian, the plant-based diet, that they were getting a lot of concern from their pediatricians or from other family members or friends as they were raising a child. And so I developed a 4-week program also to help support families to understand nutrition and to avoid deficiencies and to meet all of these concerns and have kind of a response for all these concerns, protein, iron, things like that. So that's a 4-week program, again, all telemedicine with its own separate e-course. And that one's working with the plant-based chef also to learn new recipes and to really give someone a nutrition education and a nutrition mastery. So you go through the 4-week program and then you take that hopefully for the rest of your life. Again, for someone who's very internally motivated, they've learned how to fix their problems with my support. I'm only licensed in New York and New Jersey at this moment, so I'm also offering the e-courses more widely to anyone online who wants to sit down and go through the e-course. It's just when you're working with me one-on-one, then we go through it with more support, more details. But the e-courses are also standalone for people.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.